Imbi, what's your connection to maps and Estonia?
My connection to maps started when I went to Estonian school back in the 70s. And we had Saturday morning Estonian school, and we had geography and history and all the subjects. And so it was interesting to know that for geography, we learnt about Estonia and all the counties, the cities and the rivers and the lakes. So we used to know all this off by heart. And it was, quite interesting to know that you remembered all the different counties and what their sort of like the capital city of each county was, which I can't remember anymore. But I really, really loved that because, it brought me closer to where my heritage was from and where my parents were born. And so it was sort of really interesting to know, this county was where my mum was born, this county where my dad was born and all that. And now that's sort of moved on to the next level of learning about genealogy. And so it's really interesting. Now you can sort of go back and go, this region here on the map is where my great-great-grandmother is from. And how is that related to where the rest of the family is from? So it was, I really enjoyed maps from a young age. And I think, having geography, I love the rest of the world, knowing where everything is located, where the city's located and the rivers and everything else. But you just tend to forget after a while.
Yeah. When did you get to go to Estonia for the first time?
The first time I went in 1990. So to me, that was just totally amazing. And the first thing I did was kiss the ground when I got off the ferry. And just knowing, wow, I'm in Tallinn and I could go to the country areas, and what I had learnt about, Estonia, it actually was, you could see it for real. But it was also a sad time because it was still under communist rule. So, you came from Finland where you had everything available in shops and things like that. But then, you go into country Estonia and all you have is lard, butter and a bit of milk and nothing else. So you just couldn't grasp the concept that across 90 kilometres, there's a country that is an abundance of food and economic climate is quite, amazing. And then you come to Estonia, which is part of the communism, and there's nothing there available. But people, the elderly, loved that because all their, medicines and everything was free of charge those days. So when Estonia became free, everyone was going, well, where's my medicine? I don't get it for free anymore. So, a lot of the elderly people complained about the way how Estonia changed. But, now it's completely different. Again, those elderly people have passed on and, but, everyone lives in that era of independence.
Yeah. You've lived LA, you've lived there, Siiri. Kieran, did you ever live in Eesti?
No, I was born in a country that's about as far from Estonia as you could possibly get. And by that I mean not just geographically, I mean culturally. When I was growing up in New Zealand, I couldn't imagine that I would ever visit a place that didn't speak English as its major language. That's because New Zealand in those days was just tied at the hip to Britain. And so that was the culture under which I was brought up. So for me to wind up being part of an Estonian community is really quite remarkable. And so I'm also very grateful for that opportunity because it just creates so many, such richness in my own life that I couldn't possibly have imagined as a child.
You have ancestry in New Zealand. Do you have ancestry elsewhere?
Yes, it's really interesting. I've been thinking a bit about this since getting involved with the Estonian community. I'm a third generation Irish person, and I visited Ireland only once. And so all of my heritage that I've learnt about has come from my family. And the Irish folks traditionally Roman Catholic in their religious upbringing, which meant that family was a very important part for us of how it was like a society within a society. So we had much greater contact with family members, and the Irish, of course, love big families. And so I have an uncle who was disappointed that he didn't have enough children to form a rugby union team, but he did get to 14. Mind you, it was nothing to do with him. His wife actually had the children. So I would go to family occasions where I would be surrounded by 300 relatives. And one of the great features of one of the learnings that I've learned from being part of the Estonian community here, and one of the great achievements in my mind that this community has generated, is that the people that came here to Australia, the Estonians, the folks that came here, had nothing. You know, it wasn't just that they had nothing materially, they had no family. And they've created this family, and I get kind of teary about all this because it's such an impressive and wonderful thing that people have been able to do. So for me, coming from a family of 350 people to a family that is probably, I don't know how many Estonians there are here, but
I don't even know if we know the full amount.
But they've created a community that very much is modelled on family. And so for me to be able to experience both of those things has been an enriching thing for me.
Yeah.
But the community that was formed here as a family was out of necessity because, you know, they felt very much on their own because they didn't have their family connections.
Yeah.
But that's also, the importance of that is slowly winding down, I guess, with successive generations.
Well, that's a really interesting point from my perspective, because I know very little about my heritage in Ireland. I know that, you know, and I know that from my family, but then we published a book about where people came from, and there are these stories that you get told about, you know, your ancestors and what brought them to New Zealand, etc. But they really are just, you know, they're just stories. So my linkage to Ireland is very minimal. In fact, I have a stronger linkage to Estonia than I do to Ireland.
It's really interesting, and I was curious about that connection where, you know, the distance and the cultural distance as well, how you negotiate that, and where through singing, like where you're involved in the choir and the whole family sings, like how that connects you to culture, or, you know.
Yeah, well, singing was important in my family in New Zealand too. So, you know, my parents grew up in a time when there was no television, and so their family would gather around the piano at night and just sing Irish songs.
Right.
You know, that's what they did to pass the time.
But and often when in the early days when you and I were together, like, you know, we'd sort of go to these family events and they'd all just break out in song over the dinner table, and you're sort of going, really? Like, you know, it was just, yeah, so that's very much a singing family.
So from my perspective, but that's a feature of communities. One of the binding things that and dance and that create the culture and bind people together. I think the really important aspect of this community is that those cultural things that bind people together.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I've been impressed with is that the Estonian culture doesn't finish with dancing and singing. You know, art is an important thing in Estonian culture, and that isn't something that I would have not felt about my Irish heritage, even though there is a strong heritage of Celtic art and Celtic
like handicrafts
and jewellery and all of that. It certainly wasn't passed down in the family that I was raised in. So.
Going back to the singing aspect, so the show, its title comes from a song called Kodumaa, and I'm not sure if you know it. And I was wondering if you know how the song goes, and since we're in the presence of 5 singers.
Can we sing it? Well, I don't remember Estonian words to songs very well. I remember their melodies.
Yeah.
So if I can get the words, I'm sure.
Actually, when we were living in Estonia in 2011, there was and Christian was my son was only 10. I thought, I saw a book in the bookshop called Lotte around Eesti, and Lotte is from a kid's TV series. And so this sort of like book was amazing because it had every area, every map, all the things to see and do, the type of birds, everything. It was just incredible.
Oh my gosh, you got all the songbooks out.
But getting back to the story of maps, when I was at school, everyone would say, "Oh, where does your name come from?" And I'd say, "Oh, Estonia," and they never knew where it was. So I always kept a little map of Europe, and I've still got it in my bag.
Really?
And I used to show them.
Do you still get questions?
No,
like
everyone seems to know. Oh, I know an Estonian.
Yeah. Do you ask them what's their name?
Oh yeah, I usually know them.
Yeah. It always seems the case where, oh wow.
See, I haven't opened that in years.
Oh my gosh.
So. It's all a bit worse for wear these days.
Wow.
So it actually had Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania because this was an old map before they started publishing the Soviet Union. So, yeah.
What year was this then?
Oh, I don't know. I just tore it out of an atlas that we had.
And what's on the
at
reverse?
Home. On the other side, it's just Central Europe.
Oh, right.
So I made sure that it had, Estonia on it. And then I'd show them where it was.
That's really fascinating. Because it's so easy nowadays to be able to Google like where a country is.
Yeah, that's right. But back then, no one knew.
Yeah.
No.
So
I was talking to someone just this week who kind of laughed when I mentioned that I have Estonian background, and they said, but I thought it was a fake place because it's always in those Princess Diary type movies where the prince is from, somewhere quirky and it will be Estonia. And I was like, it's a real place. And, what do you speak there? Estonian.
Yeah. It's funny when you see like a map, people are like, oh, okay, it is a real place. Like there's something about maps that make people think like, oh, it does exist. Somebody's gone to the effort of printing this out to document it.
But yeah, it always seemed like a fairyland place to me when I grew up. And then, the first time we went to Estonia, we flew over Estonia to go to Helsinki. And you actually saw the country. It was just like the map on the wall, It's like, oh my gosh, it's real,
When did you get to go?
That was after it regained independence, so in 91. What page is it?
Yeah, just verse 1.
Yeah, we can do the first verse.
Do we want it to be this high? Goes up to F for the lady. Put it down a key.
Yeah.
Custom.
It's been a while since we've sung.
Let's do this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Kas tunned maad, mis meid siin rannalt, käib Langamäe rannale ja Muunamäed metsad noorud, käib lahke Soome lahele. See on see maa, kus minu hääl kord kiikus ja mu isadel, sest laulgem nüüd ja ikka ka, see ilus maa on minu kodumaa.
When was the last time you would have performed that one?
So that was in the 2014 Song Festival. So every so often it comes up in the Song Festivals. But it's a neat song. I did a bit of, research on it. So the guy who wrote the lyrics, he died in 1890. And the guy who wrote the music died in 1942. But the poet was renowned for his expressive poetry, but really simple lyrics. And the guy who did the music, like he was 8 years old when the poet died, and he died in the 1940s. But this is one of his most famous songs, and he was a big dude in the sort of musical world, the composer.
With the lyrics themselves, do you want to go through them? Like, basically, like, I mean, you're a translator. Oh, you have the lyrics.
I do.
Yeah.
So basically, do you know a land that extends from the shores of Lake Peipsi to the Baltic Sea, and from the forests and fields of Munamägi to the genial Gulf of Finland? This is the land where my crib once rocked, and that of my forefathers. So let us sing now and forever, this beautiful land is my homeland. So here the tops of the trees give a kindly wave to the lakes and the fields. Here the first shoots sprout when heaven rains and the sun shines on the ears of grain. So it's really...
It's very poetic.
Yeah.
It's very...
Yeah.
And do you feel like you resonate with the song?
Yeah, all of those fatherland songs, but it is very much it's a country, like it's a land song, you know, and I think I have a very strong connection with the land, and like even though Estonia is so far away, you know, it's the land that's important, and obviously on the land of the people, but somehow it's more the country itself that, you know, grows the people, and that's sort of where your affinity lies.
The physical, actual soil and the earth.
But with that, but it's, you know, it's sort of, I mean, I don't have the soil so much, but it's just, it's sort of an affinity with the roots, basically, I guess.
I was going to ask Ella about connecting to roots and also homelands, the idea of a goduma, when you have shared ancestry between different countries, Australia included, and what it means to have that connection. And
I mean, I think they're all very special places for me, you know, like when you think of your special place, like I've kind of got three. And it's just, they're like where my roots are from and part of my heritage. And I think they all sort of like put my life in context in a way. Yeah, so that's really cool. But I think connecting back to like the sort of how we connect to Estonia through song, it's interesting because a lot of their, especially very fatherland songs, like this one, like Koduma, like it talks about where, you know, there was a land where my cradle or crib like rocked, which like technically isn't actually true for me. Like I was born here, right, like in Australia. But it's interesting, you still really do like have an affinity to the land. And I don't know, you just sort of, I feel very kind of at home there, and there is like a really special connection. And then some of the other songs, like for example, Talenda Mesi Pupola, I've always felt very connected to that song, especially because there's one phrase which says kas kodus sa kas võõral maal, kui sihkad isamaa poole, which is like whether you're at home or whether you're in a foreign land, like how you sort of yearn for the homeland. And so that's really connected to me because when we sing it in Estonia, it makes sense there because we are in Estonia, we're sort of at home. But then when we're here as well, we still have a connection even though we're not physically there.
Yeah.
It's like an emotional connection.
Removed. And I guess you take that the song becomes part of the element that you take home with you. And as foreigners, you lived there for a bit. What was it like being based in Estonia for that time? It was a significant amount of time.
Yeah, it was a year. Yeah, it was really amazing. I think it was really cool to finally, I don't know, I feel like there are so many parts of the culture that even though I've been visiting Estonia like every 2 or 3 years since I was born, basically, living there for a longer period, you get to like participate in all of the holidays and like all of the traditional sort of celebrations, and you get to go to school, and you sort of really get the just the full experience, you know, of what it's like. Yeah, it's really good. You can brush up on your slang, you understand the references that people are referencing. But yeah.
Sandra made a point about that when she was there, that her thing that she really connected her to the land was the weather and the climate and seeing the changes also throughout the year and kind of seeing the landscape change as well. It's not just a homogenous
Well, that was we went in winter once, and like we'd been so many times in summer. I knew the country inside out. You know, the places that we'd been to, like Tartu and Tallinn, knew them. You know, but then we went there in the winter. It was like it's white. Like I don't know where anything is. You know, and it took me a while to just sort of get my bearings and be able to see underneath the snow, like to sort of understand actually oh yes, this is, I do now know where I am, you know, like I'm orientated now, but like when I first got there, it was like, this is like a foreign city, because but when you're living there and you see the snow come, I guess it's different, but you know, to just go from summer and then suddenly to winter, that was to me quite remarkable. And because you realize that you use all these trees and, you know, things as markers rather than the shape of the land or something like that, you know.
With my grandmother, before we went in 2019, we got her to recount and map out every place that she lived, so we could do it with my mum and myself to visit and dig. It felt almost like a pilgrimage, almost like revisiting the sites in her timeline. And it was special because those buildings were still there, like they hadn't gone. It felt like, I was like, oh, it's the same, but obviously it changed. Obviously like everything else around those houses had changed, but there was something about like being like, seeing a place for the first time, being like, oh yeah, of course it looked like this. Like it looked familiar.
My favourite times are actually in autumn and spring in Estonia. Spring, because you come out from a dark winter and the first plants that are shooting through the flowers, the grass and everything, just the natural environment is just zinging and wanting to, you know, wake up. So it's just beautiful, and the colour has come back. And so it's just a beautiful time of year to be there. Then you go through summer, which everyone just enjoys summer. But I really enjoy autumn as well, because you're still part of the land, and I was living in the country area, and, you know, we could go mushrooming and you just see the changes in colour of the country, how it goes from this sort of like really hot summer brightness to sort of, you know, a dull brown and sort of, you know, the earthy colours, and heading into sort of closing down for winter. But autumn is just the beautiful time. It's just still a little bit warm, but a bit drizzly, but and there's just so much to see and do, and especially the mushrooming side of things. Whether you mushroom in the country or near the beaches, you can go mushrooming there as well. So it's just been quite incredible. But, you know, following my family footsteps, every time we go there, we do a big trip around Estonia, so to visit the family and to see new parts and everything else. So there's always something interesting to do. But I think I've done it a lot of times, but my next one is a family tour in 2025. So I'm taking everyone to the country areas and to where the grandparents are born. And
the timing also with a certain festival.
Yes, the Song and Dance Festival. So it should be quite fun.
Esmee, have you ever...
So I've also been to the Song and Dance festivals in the past, participated in the Song Festival. But what I love for me is that I have a lot of family over there that I don't know well, but they all come in for that Song Festival. So for me, it's a gravitation. Everyone, you know, comes to the Song Festival. I get to meet everyone in a fun. Everyone's happy. Everyone's been looking forward to this Song Festival. We're all in our folk costumes. I love that we get to see, like thinking about a map, you know, all of the regions have different folk costumes. So everyone's coming together, you know, aware of, you know, it's colour. There's just, it's a beautiful time to be in Estonia. So for me, it's a fun, safe environment to be in and meet a lot of people, but also it's given me the opportunity to travel around Estonia and visit where they actually live in the different areas where my grandparents are from, that sort of thing. So very much looking forward to 2025 and reconnecting with people. Social media is one thing, but to actually be there and to see the colour, to see, you know, the summer colours or a bit of spring, you know, I love all of that. Yeah. It's beautiful.
And it's kind of fun also being a tourist, you know, experiencing things as an outsider and just appreciating them.
I feel so welcomed when I'm over there. I was very lucky. My mother lived there for 3 years and she still has a lot of friends in the choir community over there. And I'm really warmly welcomed by them when I'm over there. They reach out to me and invite me out for lunch or, you know, afternoon tea or go stay with them, that sort of thing. So I don't feel like a foreigner. I really feel like I belong there when I'm there. So it's a lovely, warm environment, comforting.
Yeah. But yeah, that's really special. I thought maybe to finish off, maybe we could do Talenda Mesipulpule. Is that an easy one?
We only have 2 parts. No, 3 parts.
It always sounds good no matter how many
I'll sing
parts
quietly in the background.
Yeah.
Unless we all do the melody. I don't mind. No, okay. I feel like, yeah.
Do I need to do it? No.
Exactly.
Talent of lilles, talent of mesipupole, ja tõuseb kõue pilvülesse. Talent of mesipupole, ja langevad teele tuhanded, veel jõuavad tuhanded ja viivad vaeva ja hoole ja lendavad mesipuu poole. Hing, oh hing, sa raskel all, kui sa hakkad isama poole. Kas kodu sa, kas võõral maal, kui sikkad isama poole. Ja puhugu vastu su surmatul ja lennagu vastu su surmakuul. Sa unustad surma ja hoole ning töötad isama poole. Hing, oh hing, sa raskel all, kui sa hakkad isama poole. Kas kodu sa, kas võõral maal, kui sikkad isama poole. Kui sikkad isama poole.
Wow.
Snappy ending.
That was very on the. That was really good.
It's a great song.
Yeah. When was the first time you all heard that song?
Oh, I don't know. We tried to sing it, I think, with Leke some time ago, or with what's the mixed choirs or something for one of the Estonian festivals.
There was a choir that would perform here when previous generation, Eric Holm and all of those singers.
Yeah.
That would be the first time I would have.
So we knew the song before we went to the song festivals.
First time I heard it was 1990. And
Sounds very specific memory.
yes.
Yeah.
And because that was the first time we sang at Lalubidal with, it was an Adelaide choir. We went with another choir. There was a Loksa Gor or a Loksa choir just out of Tallinn. And some Adelaide people knew these people, and so they invited us along. So we actually sang and did the Rongake or the march as well. So yeah, it was just incredible to be there and experience a song festival that you'd sort of heard about so many times beforehand, and just see the masses of audience and singers.
Could you sense that there was something?
Yeah,
1990 that.
Yeah, for the first time they actually had Estonian flags, because up till then during the Russian rule it was all Russian flags, but this was the first time that they were breaking away since 1989 with the Baltic chain, and so they really wanted to gain their independence. So it was on the cusp of gaining independence, which was just really awesome.
Being there to be a part of it, it's really special.
Talent of mesipupole is like a really good example of how I think songs can really just eloquently express emotion, like it really, I don't know, it doesn't really matter what mood you're in. Once you start singing it, you sort of really feel like the emotion and the connection. And yeah, I think for me, since I wasn't born like before independence, so I don't really know much. I didn't live through, I guess, what it was like for Estonia to be occupied, basically. But learning the songs, like, you definitely feel the emotion, and it helps you sort of connect to the history, because they were all written, you know, by people in the context of everything that's happened in Estonia, you know, since the very beginning. So yeah, I think that's one of the other really great things about singing.
And that poetry kind of is a way to avoid censorship. Like, it, you know, it has undertones that can avoid those kind of heavy censors of what can and can't be said.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing about this song. It's just a song about bees, really, you know, but there's just this undertone of, you know, nationalism, and they had to do that during the Soviet rule, kept their sense of nationalism and sort of resistance fighting, sort of mentally at least, going, you know.
Yeah, I guess the last thing I'd like to say is that it's really remarkable to me how much the land and the natural world has influenced Estonian culture. So much of what we sing about is these songs are all embedded in the natural world, and it's just, you know, I find that remarkable. It's a very honest way to view your existence in the world, I think.
And it's the very fields and forests that you've been fighting for, you know, for your freedom.
Kind of the start, I was curious to talk about how you came across the map in your family.
Yeah, I think it was about 97 when I got my mother to sell it. My mother had been burgled 3 times in a year in Punchbowl. Anyway, I talked her into selling up Punchbowl, moving out, and we used the money to build a house for her on the acreage we had at Galston. So as she was going to move, we had to clean out the garage, which had 45 years of storage. I've still got 2 cases downstairs, wooden cases that they used to bring their possessions over from Estonia.
Is it decorated? Are those boxes decorated?
No, they're just wooden crates.
Okay.
Sort of like a name painted on it in paint and some code for what ship or whatever it had been on. It was just what people travelled in with, or what they could. I think we had 3 or 4 originally, but the others have just rotted over time, and no one thought of giving them to archives years ago. They thought it was just family stuff.
Yeah.
So when I was cleaning out the garage, I came across this cardboard tube. I thought, what's in here? I pulled it out, and there was a map in there. And I found another one, which was a family tree that I sent you earlier today. And that's a family tree my father had put together. He trained as an engineer and an architect or something at the uni in Esti. And so he'd gotten what information he could in Esti and made the family tree. So I've got that framed as well, that's interesting for me. Although I've got a 4th cousin or something in Estonia who's a specialist in artificial intelligence. And he does a lot of work on Jenny.com, and he said, there's errors there, but for what you could find out yourself at the time, I thought it was a pretty amazing effort.
I can see the engineering come through in that. I can see it's very like, it looks like a construction, like a blueprint almost.
Yeah, and I only made that chart in pencil at the very end of it. Oh, yeah, it was interesting. But yeah, and that sort of interest for me. I don't know if anyone else would ever care, because there's better records than Jenny. But I also found that map, and I thought the map, because it's a map of war zones and the war theatre, I thought that's interesting. I didn't know it was worth anything. I didn't even bother asking. I just thought, this is a piece of interest. And because my grandfather had been the Maavanem, which is governor, parish elder, whatever you call it, for Petseri. So, and
okay.
And there's a list of prominent people who are involved in the Estonian constitution back in 1920s, whatever. He's actually listed on that as one of the people, probably because of his position. So I'm guessing that's how he got that map, just as information. I don't think it's a highly secret one. I thought, if you're escaping, why would you have brought that with you? You'd leave that for the soldiers, because he wasn't an army. I don't know whether he was in the army. Maybe he was.
So the term you used was Maavanem, so like county or like parish elder.
Yeah, well, yeah. See, Maavanem for Petseri, which is one of the states or areas, so it's sort of like a governor, but sort of not quite up at that level, but he did look after the whole Betsy area. So, well, he died when I was 3, so I never got to talk to him about it. And I guess, with my mother, we didn't talk about too many things back. I mean, I know some of the family history, but that grandfather died when I was 3. My father died when I was 8. So there weren't many people to talk about history from.
Was your mother ever interested in talking about that kind of history, or was it kind of?
Yeah, the reason she was so strong in her work here was that the night the communists came in on June 14th in 1941, she was at home playing the piano for her fiance. The doors burst open, the Russian soldiers came in, and they're after her father, stepfather actually. They said, "Oh, he's not home, he's off visiting people in the country." And they looked at their list and said, "Oh, hold on, we've got a quota here to fill." And they looked at my mother's fiance. "Oh, you're an officer in the army, aren't you?" "Yes." "Come with us." And he went to Siberia, and she never saw him again.
Wow.
And that was her motivation to work so hard forever against communism here.
Did
And
she ever get to go back to Estonia?
yes, she went in about probably 96 or so with a academic daughter, and said a lot of people, when she came back, she saw the house where she grew up, which was on number 1 Venetanov. So it did sort of, from her room, you could see down to Raikoja-Platz. And so she was very much in the centre. Her mother was the head of the YWCA, which is the top women's social organisation. So she had all the political connections there. And plenty of money to live a wonderful life. She went through a top private school. Friends would say when she was a teenager, "Oh, do you want to fly down to Poland for a weekend? We can take my plane." To come from a life like that and to come here where you work as a refugee. My father had been doing 2 degrees at uni, got kicked out there, came here, and the agreement was worked at Central Station, sweeping the station for a few years. What that did to people's egos, I think, is something that we just don't understand. How they had to sort of, they grew up in a generation where men had to be the providers and look after the family, and they come out here. My mother found jobs more easy and looked after the family and provided. And the men, what do you do? Sit around and get drunk all the time because you've got to cope with everything. Wouldn't have been easy at all.
No.
So I did talk to my mother more. She told me about that history. That's why she'd moved. She's written 2 lots of stories, which were more for my son, telling me about family and like when he was born, and she used to babysit and whatever. She wrote a bit about the family history and the escape to Australia. They arrived in Sydney at sometime in the morning on the boat, but the boat wasn't allowed to dock till 6 in the afternoon because unionists were on strike because they said, "We've got refugees coming to take our jobs."
Right.
Is that so different to what's happening now? It's sort of amazing how history does repeat itself like that. And I find things like that interesting, that we haven't moved beyond that in a lot of ways. And then they got taken out to Bathurst camp by buses. And a few weeks later, they said, "Hold on, we're going to move you to the Greta camp." Then they were there for a few years, and there's a whole story around that.
I think it's really interesting how you talked about that cyclical nature. I think after I've been speaking with Maie Barrow, and how she was talking about people in Newcastle that would jump ship. Some of the Estonians would help them move in, get on to the mainland to start a new life, and how I guess it's really interesting, those repetitive cycles of migration and refugees that are still happening. And also, I guess the main one at the moment is seeing what's happening in Ukraine. In 2014, we already saw this was already going to happen on a larger scale, but how similar this sort of thing of appeasement of, we don't want to anger Russia too much, we don't want to do a full-scale war, but it's resulting in a lot of people dying.
Yeah, and I've been mixing with some of the leading Ukrainians here a fair bit. Katerina is wonderful. She grew up in Ukraine, and I talked to her first probably early last year when it all happened. And it was interesting because she had played volleyball in Ukraine and in American University. And because I've got over 50 years of volleyball, so we had a great chat about that.
Yeah.
I asked her if she'd come and play. She said, "When we win the war, I'll come and play with you." But Andrew Manjinsky and his sister, Ivana. When I was introduced to them, they said, "You're Leo Looveer's son." Her name was, we talked about her all the time at home because their parents were involved with the captive nations and all that kind of stuff back since the 50s. And so they knew my mother very well. And I hadn't realised how active she had been until you talk to people from other communities who all say, "Oh, we remember that. We know the name," and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, the Ukrainians, it's easy to look back, but we did nothing about Georgia and things that happened back there. 2014 Crimea was a warning. And I think for Putin, it was, let's attack Crimea, see what happens. The rest of the world did nothing. He said, well, I can attack Ukraine now because the world just sits back. And we got to a stage last year where the Ukrainians here said, yep, the media has got Ukraine fatigue. They want to know what's happening, but they're sick of focusing on it and they want to move on to something that'll sell papers or get interest. That's why that article I saw the other day I shared about what America did for the Estonian independence, how they worked for what is, because we're going through now with Leet having redone the Constitution 3 years ago. What is our purpose? What is our function?
Could you kind of give a brief, I guess, explanation on what you see Leet's purpose? Or
the Council of Estonian Organisations in Australia, or AESL, we call it Leet because it's the last word, it's easiest, but it's the umbrella organisation, and it was for societies in Australia, so Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Brisbane, where there was Newcastle, Dilimita, Wollongong, Canberra, Perth was there. Over the years, some of them have died out, and a lot of other groups, like some choirs were members in Melbourne Sports Group, Melbourne Scouts. I think Virumaa is a member, the dance group. And so there are different groups that become members, and it's a way to try to keep together. Now, because, well, if we go back to when it was formed in the 50s, communication wasn't what it is today. So they said it's easier, let's set up Leet to be in the headquarters in Sydney for 3 years, Melbourne 3 years, Adelaide 3 years, and it rotated. Now, that was fine, and I don't know how it worked then, but I know that in the last 10, 20 years, when it moved from one city to another, a lot of the records didn't get passed on well. People didn't know what happened. I know Maie, when she was leading Sydney, they had a lot of think tanks and they developed their thinking about different issues. But when they passed out of Melbourne, the thinking didn't go across. So it's every 3 years reinvent the wheel. So now we're trying to sort of, what is the responsibility? Because Leet being people now, it's got a rep from each state and then 4 people independently elected for their skills or attitude or whatever. It should be there more, but they're not people who actually do something. We don't have one centre where we can run dances or dinners or whatever. So it can't work like the Senates does in Sydney or in Melbourne or Adelaide or whatever. So as an umbrella group, I think its role, and I was just in Lithuania a month ago, 6 weeks ago, at the World Council meeting, and we went through a summary of what's each country doing. Canada and America still see their national body as mainly a political body, although there's less to do in America, but they did a lot of work in Washington.
Yep.
And they coordinate a bit about what happens in the different cities. Same in Canada, they did a lot of lobbying and they've still got a group who does a lot. And I think that might be part of our role. Another role is communication. Find out what's happening in EST, pass it on to all the different groups in Australia, so we can share information that too many people don't have the time to go and look for. So information about funding, about different programs. People know about Lolo Bill, but there's a whole lot of other things happening as well. So I think we need to pass that kind of information on and share it.
It's an interesting point you mentioned about it kind of being fragmented or dispersed, because there are so many different groups that operate in Australia that, apart from some events like Survey or Eesti Päevad, very much everyone is in a little bubble at one point.
Yeah, I mean, Survey, I think I respect. I never went to Survey because my mother couldn't afford it. And I think there are some issues around Survey. It's become an adult camp as much as a children's camp, I think. And it is very expensive, which is why ECFA, the Cultural Foundation, supports, there's the Hans Otts Award to bring people from other states in. every year. But that's still a limited amount. When I was growing up, people went to Sulev. We had the Estonian every 3 years. We went to Scout Guide Jamborees also every 3 years. And we were meeting other Estonians from around Australia quite often, maybe more Melbourne, Adelaide. Wollongong was there fairly strong at the time as well. And didn't matter, I think they probably joined in with Sydney or Wollongong, depending where they lived and transport. But people seem to know each other. I don't know with young people now. I know there's the same in every other country. The backpackers are a different group. They don't want to join any sets anywhere. Like we found with Madison before the 2018 Estonian in Sydney, if you want people to go to Esmee, you've got to give them something to go to. It's got to be a function with music, food and drink. But they won't become members and they won't help develop the sets anywhere much. Where the growth is happening, I think, is the Murilas-rings, where the parents want to get their kids mixing with others. And so last year, the Sydney Murilas-ring said, we want to have the intergenerational play dates where we get some older people. And I thought, oh, great, I'm one of the older people. And Dio Salasol came along, she's 91, I think now. And Maie was there and a few others. So it was interesting. And then earlier this year, they had one session up here at my place. They came up for the Saturday during the day. And so they're people who are trying to get their kids to mix with other young kids. Ellen with the Sydney group is one I've seen closely. They start off doing songs like Tere, 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 Mina, Ola, and Juho, and you sing and introduce your name and things like that. And little games where you learn about numbers or animals and all the rest. And it's great stuff they're doing. They're now saying, and I've talked to Iti in Queensland, they're saying, but what about when our kids turn 5 and they don't come to Murilas-ring because they're off at school? What have they got? And they'd like to see something like maybe once a month on a weekend, get together for a few hours and let the kids talk again to other kids in Estonian. Because I know I married an Australian. My kids went to the local school. They want to play sport with their schoolmates, not go to some Estonian thing, which meant nothing. And I think ethnicity and the diaspora changes over time. When I was growing up, we went to the Estonian Sports Club and, we all got to Auburn Girls High somehow. Now, people don't do that anymore. They want to do everything locally. And I find in Sydney, like I moved house from Lucas Heights to Galston, and people said, oh, God, 1 hour is too far to drive in Sydney.
Yeah.
For me, when I got married, I was in Summer Hill for volleyball. DY was an hour. Hornsby was an hour. Liverpool was an hour. Southern, everything was an hour. To me, I'm used to driving.
Yeah.
But a lot of people in Sydney won't. And like they say, all the new communities, they want everything within 10, 15 minutes.
I find it really interesting with how important distance is that plays a factor in the people you know and the people that the networks that you engage with. For a lot of people that, live up in Queensland or, in Perth or something, and the only way to engage is through those big events where they know people will be there.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I find like as you get older, you want to go back to what you grew up with. So in terms of language, food, talking to people, songs, all of those things. So I'm dating an Estonian at the moment. I've had a couple of Estonian relationships, and it is much more satisfying because you can swirl across and being on the international committee, hearing people talk it, my brain swapped. And now I'm starting to think in Estonian when I'm talking again. And that's a big change that then you can communicate. Language skills, shit. I've got a doctorate in English, so my vocab's pretty good. But in Estonian, if you ask me what's the word for beige, Christ, or a different shade of colour, I just don't have the vocab.
Do you have any ideas in maybe where the Estonian community is going or what your hopes are?
It's a question that I've posed to a lot of people in the last 5 years. The lady who's head of the American Estonian said that to me 2 years ago, last year, said she thinks in 20 years there won't be an Estonian community in America. I think it's changing because New York seems to be building again and a lot of young Estonians are moving there. That might get re-energised, but I think also looking around here, you look at your generation, you've got maybe half a dozen who are fairly active. How many others? And I mean, there are people like Felix who want to go back 3-4 generations, say, oh, where did my family come from? And there will be people who want to see that. And I think it gives you an individuality. I'm special. I'm not just another common Anglo-Saxon. And I think that's a big thing for a lot of people from all countries. The young people, it's unless you marry another Estonian, it's very hard to keep the language going. And what else is there in culture? You can take people to Survey, you can teach them to sing and dance, but what does that mean? As they get older, are they still part of the culture if they're not taking part in anything? I guess I see the culture as doing Estonian things. And what does that mean? And I guess it's a problem all around the world. No one's really sure.
Well, I'm actually I'm going back on the program. I went in 2017 to Estonia for the Rahvuskaaslaste Back to Your Roots program. And this year I'm going back again because they are allowing people to reapply. And that was a really interesting program because that was literally what you just said about getting young people to come back from around the world, some who had varying levels of connection or language knowledge, and really kind of putting everyone into this controlled, it was like a social experiment almost.
Yeah,
you bring 20 people from overseas that have some connection and try and get them interested. And I guess we were all there because we were showing interest in reconnecting, and perhaps that's what's needed. You need to have that spark or motivation.
I guess without the language, you don't have communication. I mean, you could talk to another Canadian or American reasonably, but then you're just talking to anyone. You could look up any random person on the internet and talk to them, or in Facebook. For the Estonia stuff, you need the language first, and then I guess you've got to find the people with some common interest. Now, for a lot of people, the common interest might be tracing family heritage or tracing, like the work you're doing the other night. Where do these costumes come from? What's behind them? What's the meaning? Why has this one got vertical stripes? That one's got crosshatch or whatever. There's all those kind of things to look up, and you find someone you want to talk to. But again, it's got to be available at the time that a person is ready for it. You can't say, oh, no, this is when we're presenting it, like with the uni lecture. This lecture's on tonight, come or you miss out.
I guess, do you have any closing remarks, or I guess what your hopes are?
I think that there's a lot of the Estonian groups who are existing who need to think about what is the future and how do we achieve it. Martin Kurvits has written a paper about the future of Estonian cultures, and I'm talking about that with Lee soon. I've sent that to them all. But I think we need to think about what is the future of Estonian culture. Is it the Muridas rings, the young people? What's the future of Estonian house? And as I said, I think it's activities that bring people in. Doesn't have to be that they all come to a concert, but different things that get people involved and bring them in and mixing with each other. I think we need to get the communities to look at what the future might be, how they get, what does it mean to be Estonian? I've asked that question before. How do we keep people into the culture? And I think that is bringing people into the centre where they mix with other Estonians, share experiences, share the language and songs and different functions, and different activities that don't have to be mainstream. Like they don't have to all come in for a big concert like we have for Independence Day. Mother's Day can be a small event for the small group of mothers who are involved. We need the other activities like the making black bread and the weaving and the folk costume and whatever. I enjoyed the session earlier this year where the guy came and talked about the poet, things like that. The kino. I think all of those things that get people, drag them into different parts of the culture, the parts that they're interested in. And then if they come to those, say this is interesting, they'll come to bigger events like Eesti Päevad. We need people who push those different activities, and we've also got to learn to give them credit. One of the biggest motivators I found through volleyball was in Japan. They had 50 people above the CEO. They were all honorary member, life member, whatever. You gave them titles and they were happy to come and bring in money or donate or whatever. And I think we've got to learn to pat people on the back, give them big thank yous in public so they feel good about what they do. And I think that reward thing is a big side that we Estonians are not good at. I started out being very radical, thinking the old people don't know what they're doing. Now I worry at times that I'm not in touch with enough people. because I grew up without a father. I'm not the kind that goes down to the pub and has a beer. So, yeah, you sort of operate a bit differently, and you've got to find different people on your wavelength.
That's exactly what this show really prompted me to do, was to reach out to as many people as I could. I'm displaying works by 100 people that I haven't probably seen the majority of them since 2019 or 2018, and reconnecting, talking about it again to people and hearing about how they feel nowadays about Estonia, or their connection versus how it could have been in the past. And my fear was putting a show for the community that didn't actually engage with anyone. I was fearing that putting it on and not actually talking to people and reaching out would just mean that it's just my idea of what people think and not actually showing a diverse opinion. And you can totally talk about maps for 5 hours and wall maps, but I think there's so much about why are we even talking about it in the first place? What is it about Estonia that draws, for me, it does have this kind of weird gravitational pull.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that a thing? Is it just by growing up immersed in it that's that pressure? But I think there's something more there, and I think that's what I want to get at.
There's the people who've been to Laulupiro know that there's a passion, there's something that hits you emotionally being there. But I know, at times I'm sitting here at night and I go into something on YouTube, and then there's something from Laulupiro, and I'm suddenly playing 3 hours of music from Laulupiro, bawling my eyes out. He keeps carrying on at me saying, why can't you ever get emotional? You don't show emotions, except when I hear songs. Yeah, Estonia brings up passions. I grew up with it with my mother. That was a big part for me. And because I went to all the things that she organised and saw a lot and understood what we'd been through.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is to other people, and it'd be great to get someone to go back and interview a whole lot of people and write something worthwhile about the psychological side of it. Passion that comes for some people, and I don't know if everybody gets that.
And
there's a lot of people say, oh, I feel Estonian, and I think it's, as I said, I think it's because you want to be different to the Anglo-Saxons. But when you've been involved, it is something, and I find it strange that why do I feel like that about Estonia? I mean, I do feel like that about Australia. Like Maie Barrow said for a long time, she won't know who she supports more until Australia plays Estonia in the final of World Cup soccer. And then
I know there's that internal conflict at Eurovision, whether you should be rooting for Estonia or Australia as well.
But so there is something, and I feel I've got a stronger attachment to Estonia, even though I won't go live there. I've grown up here. I feel Australian very much. I guess I sort of like living here more than, and I haven't lived in enough other places to compare. But yeah, there is a passion, and is it what my mother instilled in me? Or is it something else? Is it everything about that? I went to Scouts and folk dancing and Airstick and all those things, and all of that added up to, and I think Australians generally don't show much patriotism. It'll be an interesting study.
These are the maps. You're welcome to have, as I say, we've got these in various sizes, and it doesn't really matter if the map's a bit smaller because we've got the mounts, so you can mount them.
Yeah, so
the question is, which of these maps, if any, are you interested in?
I mean, I love them all. I think
we can't probably have all.
the thing is, so with the show, I've got 100 maps in total that were I don't know if you remember.
I remember. Everybody had to, and they were pretty horrible. We all got it the country wrong.
Some of them are fantastic. They you can see the journeys that their parents or they themselves took as kids, all stops along the road,
Well, don't put mine up. I think mine was a very, very liberal freehand sketch of Estonia, which when I thought about it later, I was ashamed of.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm part of the show is I've reprinted them all onto vellum, which is baking paper.
Yeah.
So, and I'm displaying them. I'm doing 2 lots of displays. But the first, basically, I'm putting 2 on top of each other, so they kind of obscure each other.
Yeah.
And then the second week after, I'm going to swap them around, so they
they change rotation, because I like the idea.
But if you do that, can you see the bottom map through the top map to see what the difference is?
Only just. And so part of the reason I'm going to switch it around on the second week is so that each map at least can be seen front, because I know some people were like maybe not as happy with how their map turned out. Yeah. And because it's a long time ago, it's 6 years ago.
But also, to be honest, I'm not sure how seriously I took it. I just sat down and
that's what I love about it, that people kind of like
just did
just
it.
Like, that's what I think.
Well, I mean, I could do a map of Australia too, it'd be sort of...
Yeah.
But it might probably get a map of Australia better than Estonia because I see it more. But do you want a good, proper map of Estonia to show what it's really like to compare with people's memories of freehand drawings?
This is the debate I've been having with myself about how to rationalize whether, because the show's titled tunned maad, like it's all about knowing and memory, like can you ever rely on your memory to be accurate, and whether that supersedes the actual place itself, like whether your memory actually is more important than the physical geography. And I've been talking to my grandma about it.
I think you should put a true map of Estonia up, because that would be interesting for people who know nothing about Estonia, looking at it from an outside point of view. That's what it really looks like. And this is how people remember it, and they're all different. If you've got the thing, put it right in the middle, so you've got however it goes, some going this way, some going that way, then people can look and compare that and then start to question people's memory of how they do it. If you don't have a proper map of Estonia, they have nothing to use as a comparison or a standard.
Point. Yeah, I guess that's how the original show was considered, blurring like what becomes reality in terms of when we talk about being in a diaspora, like when we aren't in the place, what becomes the place through stories and like memory. And so the title actually came because of those panels, the 12 panels that Sulev has inquired about. Those from
that big map,
the I think the A1 or A0.
They're really big ones.
They're huge, and there's 12 of them. I kept thinking about like how easily like you can lose those records, and how like the people's memories like lives on, but like those maps and those like the
memory
physical,
lives on, but it's not quite true. Exactly what I said in my talk yesterday, that family history, you have anecdotes and stories that get passed from one generation to the other, and sometimes they bear no resemblance to the truth whatsoever. It's like the Ainsar family. Ainsar used to help Estonian sailors jump ship in Newcastle. And when they arrived, because he worked as a coal miner, but he also had a farm like all Estonians, scratch one generation and there's a farmer there. So when these people turned up, he would introduce them to his neighbours as relatives, because, of course, these people didn't speak English. And then he'd help them on the way. And we've got a lot of passports with the first page torn out, so you don't know who they actually are.
Right.
Because they just disappeared.
Yeah.
And we're looking at the 1920s or so. And these two people turned up in the archive one day looking for information about their grandfather, who was Gustav Ainsar's brother, born in Helsinki in the early 1900s or late 1890s. The problem with that is that Gustav Ainsar didn't have a brother. And he wasn't born in Helsinki. He was actually an Estonian who lived in the Caucasus, and he sailed from the Caucasus before he came to Australia. So obviously, and this chap is buried under the name of Ainsar in the Cessnock Cemetery. So obviously this was one of these so-called relatives.
Yeah.
So when I tried to explain it to these two young people, they got really hostile. And they said, well,
the whole memory is like...
Yeah, couldn't I look up all the boy children who were born in whatever year it was in Helsinki? And I said, well, how many male babies do you think were born in Helsinki at that time?
Yeah.
Well, and it was my fault that I didn't have the information. And when I tried to point out that a lot of family anecdotes are myths because they hide something, and if their grandfather was one who jumped ship, that would be the thing to hide. Well, they went away really angry. So last week I got an email from someone who's looking for information about the Ainsar family, because Gustav Ainsar was her great-grandfather, and the Gustav name came through on the oldest son. So Eensar's son was Gustav, and obviously his son was called Gustav because this person's father's called Gustav. So yes, that was a true family link. And we've got a lot of stuff about Eensar. We don't have much about Gustav, but we've got a lot about the original Gustav, and we've got a lot about Leonard, the other son, and his sisters, because Leonard rode in the police 8 for Australia in the Munich Olympics. And as he was going over by boat, he wrote to his mother about the trip. Then in one of the letters, he says that, he's seen the Estonian team, but he hasn't had a chance to speak to them yet. And the 2 girls, I think there may have been something wrong with the third daughter health-wise, but 2 of the girls became school teachers, which back in the 20s or so, for immigrants' daughters to go to university and get to be school teachers was a pretty rare thing. So they educated their brothers, or paid for the brothers' education, put it that way, who both became policemen. And so we've got all this sort of stuff. And the boys wrote to their mother in English and the girls wrote to their mother in Estonian. And they only referred to Eensar as vanamees. They did not like him. He was definitely not a loved father.
Wow.
And so I just sort of gave her a little summary of what we had. Yeah. Anyway, within 2 hours, she emailed back and said, she's so delighted. She's in the Gold Coast and she's going to come down and have a look at it. So there was a case where the story was true and the other case where the story wasn't. So trips and memories.
It is funny, that kind of myth making, or when things become legends or stories of, that have warped over time. It's hard to call it out, to be like, that's not true, because at what point does it become like its own thing?
I also talked about our DP collection. And the thing about the DP records is that you can find out from the immigration and the naturalisation records, the stories of people. So the people who we don't have here, because they have never participated in Estonian stuff, and that I always send the people to the Australian archives of various places to look for it. The men had to be under 40, I think it was, so that they could work 25 years to earn their pension, and the women had to be under 35. So a lot of people got false papers. And I know a friend of my mother's made himself 10 years younger so that he could get here. They would cheat about their names and where they were born and their education status. Like to go to Canada, they were looking for labourers. So it was no good saying you're a doctor or an engineer. They didn't want to, but you'd say you were a farmhand and yes, you could read and you could write your own name, sort of thing. And then off you'd go. Jan made himself 10 years younger and he came here. And as soon as he came here, he got a job on the railway because, they had 2-year contracts. But his was the railways and he stayed there until retirement. But then as he was getting older, he realised that if the documents stayed true, he would have to work till he was 75. So he fronted up at the HR or immigration or wherever with his original birth certificate and said that he'd just been he's coming up to retirement age and he'd been looking through his documents and he just realised that his birth date was wrong. And, this is things. So, but because he'd worked all that time in the railways, by that time he was a citizen, and Australian male citizens could go on the pension at 65, irrespective of how long they'd worked. All these... There you go. Again, these stories. But anyway, do you want to think about a map, a sort of a reference map for the collection?
I think because when I did the title, because it comes from the Godulma song.
Yeah, I know the song.
Yeah, you do. You should join the choir. You should. Did actually really want to prioritize people's memories over the location, especially how it's been a while since they were made, that people's opinions have probably changed, especially where you put a border. Like, the politics of borders is very, very relevant.
Yeah, like it here, totally different. Well, considering that the border now comes...
It's like right down the middle.
Right through here.
I don't know, it's been really, of course, with Ukraine... talking about borders and occupied territory versus historical claims, and when you look at this part of Estonia, there's a lot of Russian speakers and
More down.
like near Betseri.
Around here,
You see Betseri is now in Russia, so it probably
It
Veru.
comes through there, and Pihkva has gone, because Pihkva is Wisconsin now. The border comes down sort of through the middle now, about there. So Pihkva is over the border, because Katrin Kanarik was the councillor in Pihkva, and then when Estonia sent out 2 Russian spies again, then Katrin was declared persona non grata and sent out from here. And she went back to the Foreign Office and she said the good thing is that she will never go into any of the Soviet countries again because she's been chucked out.
Yeah.
So she can only do other ones.
It's really cool. Like there is quite a few of these smaller ones upstairs and they're framed. I think one of them actually came from a DP camp because on the back it says it was donated by someone at the camp. They made the frame.
Anyway, you have seen our beautiful big
I have
powerhouse.
seen this big one.
Yeah, this is from the Powerhouse exhibition.
Oh, right.
Yeah, our new home meals.
Yeah, I've seen records of that.
Yeah.
I've been talking to Annie actually. Annie.
Yeah.
I keep thinking her name's Annie. She's really lovely.
She is. And I'm trying to think of who we had. She was the second curator that worked with us on that. The first one moved on and then Annie came in and did it. I mean, it's up here. Probably nobody looks at it much.
Right, yeah.
But I've got nowhere to store it in there. Yeah. But what we have is I've asked the ECFA for money to put up gallery track.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to put gallery track all along this wall.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And then we're going to put it along the back, down the side, along here, and around that corner, and the hangers.
Yeah.
And you see, I mean, here I've got 1 Gunnar Nema and 2 Nina Ratsepot's paintings, and there's the whole batch of them up there, and I want to hang them all. So, I mean, I'm no art guru, but I think over the years I seem to have picked up a lot about art, and probably because the U Committee used to do an art purchase prize every year. And
which committee?
The U Committee at the University of New South Wales. We used to run an art exhibition, and the university would buy the winning painting for the university collection. So that's how. And so we'd have an opening night cocktail party type thing. And I remember Under Black, who's Latvian, and I, the only bloody bots on the committee, and I invited Velan Olav Bihlak.
Oh, yes.
To come.
I'm going to be meeting her grandson in Eesti, Axel Hagensen.
Yeah, is he there now? Because he was here for a long time.
Yeah, we got chatting because I think he received an ECFA grant.
Yes.
And I was like, who is this guy? And then I knew his mother,
Ulvi, yeah.
And so we're going to meet up when I'm over
good.
there. I'm very curious because he's got a very interesting relationship to Australia, being born here but moving to Eesti and kind of having a different connection.
It's actually, in that sense, I've had a funny relationship with the Estonian community because a lot of Estonian community people only have connections in the Estonian community. They don't partake in the Australian one, and I probably have as much, if not more, outside, especially around the university. So I get to go to places that are different. And
that's, I guess it's really funny because you do have that connection to UNSW as well. And for me, like, a lot of my Estonian stuff has entered my university life because of my art making. And I've hosted 2 events here with UNSW, the Mardi Gras and then the annual after party. So they've become 2 worlds that are very entwined now. And it's funny because you know some people at university, they don't ever leave that context either. Like you become institutionalized, you become really embedded. Your friend network is all through uni, but I've always had like these 3 worlds, and now my work has become its own network, which I've noticed is so intricate. Like nearly everyone on my team at work is an artist, which blows my mind.
I was just thinking yesterday when all my old friends lined up in front of the camera to say hello when we were doing before we started my Zoom thing, and I thought it's great. It really is.
When we were in primary school, down the road, and they had this real focus on
you know, the rivers of Australia and New South Wales and major cities. And they'd opened up the Indian Pacific all the way from Sydney through to Broken Hill, off to Perth. And I thought, wow, you know, we went when I was only, you know, in the early 60s, we went by train to Adelaide. And I always knew that the end of New South Wales was Broken Hill.
I thought it was the Market Gardens at Penrith where was your end of Sydney.
No, but we were in the car when we were very young. And we went a different way home from town. And we went past this place called Hunters Hill Hotel. Yeah. And I went, oh, my God, this is the end of New South Wales. I got Hunters Hill and Broken Hill mixed up. And I went, I've seen the whole of New South Wales. The concept of, because I thought it was a big, big land. But, you know, how come we were so close? It's not too far from home. So, yeah, I always had a fascination with maps and where we're going.
And how did you find out you were wrong? When did you?
Many years ago, when I was an adult, I think I went to Hunters Hill Hotel and I went, I know this place. I thought this was the end of...
You recognised the name.
Because it was an Art Deco. It's on the corner and it's really distinctive. It's an older pub. And, every time I go past, I go... And I thought this was the end of the boundary, the border of New South Wales was here. Yes.
So what about these maps? This is your one from the 27th of the 3rd.
Well, see, I put the train line in because my great...
But you didn't do the Tapa to Tartu line.
Well,
you didn't connect Tapa, did you?
I didn't want Tapa. I wanted to show that was the junction point. And then that one went from the capital to Narva, which is the boundary to Russia. And Tapa was like the Strathfield of Estonia, the equivalent.
The Chatswood.
And where my great-grandmother had her little budka in the corner of the station selling books and things because her husband, he used to be a railway inspector and he got promoted. They used to live in Haapsalu. And then they went to Tapa to live in the middle. So that was an upgrade. Yes. And other relatives were ferrymen.
In Hiiumaa as well?
Well, Hiiumaa is where the ferries go from Haapsalu. But Lembit, my cousin, married, so because the Western people are all...
The Western people.
The Western Estonians. Saarlaset. And the Läänemaa people. They're all marine and Viking territory and they're all, sailors and fishermen and that's why I put the little ferries in and
the little
and the little well, there's 1,500 little islands running around. And then I nominated the highest point, Munamägi, which isn't that high, but it's
the highest.
It's the highest. And then I've always wanted to go to Peipsi-Järv.
Yeah, and somebody drew of the Piirisaar, which is one of the islands in Peipsi-Järv. There's two islands in it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and one of them is like a Russian community. They're called they've got like the old onion farms there.
Oh yes. Yeah.
I think they're called like the old believers because when they left to Estonia, they kept the old
Russian
Orthodox.
Because we call them the right church, Õige Kirik, Russian Orthodox.
Yeah, I think they've got their own name, but they live all along that border. And I think when we went to, what was that town? Kuremaa.
We went to Mustveer.
Yeah, around there. They're the onion farmers. That's what they do.
And we finally got to go there when they had that big festival. So, and Pyhäjärvi, which is a lake, that's where my great aunt and uncle, they went to Pyhäjärvi because it was near Tartu. That's where they would go for their summer vacations. So that's a very scenic and touristy area. And Pärnu is the beachy area in summer. Rakvere, well, that's where they've got we went there finally. They got the big bull.
We did we went down the main street.
Yeah.
And then there was the sculpture at the top.
So Rakvere. Oh, that's right. Because at camp, when we went to camp, 1 year our tare was called Rakvere Yankot, the Rakvere bunnies. So we ended up pretending we were Playboy bunnies. And we won that year.
Yeah.
For the best hat.
There you go.
We put in a big effort. So I always remember Rakvere.
What's this at the top here?
Narva Jöso, see where the sun is shining?
That's the sun.
And that's where my mum and her family would go for their summer holidays, along the Somme Locht, which is the Finnish Gulf near Narva. So that's like going to the Gold Coast, the equivalent of
That's
the Gold
where police houses, you would go there, and of course you have to pay, but they were also...
Oh, is that Sillamäe?
It's close to it.
Yeah.
But Sillamäe is new.
Sillamäe was the 50s.
Yeah, that was built by the Soviets, but Narva Jöso was that was the celebrities and the it place to go in summer because you're on the...
We were always, when the school holiday started, we went to Tartu Malle.
Yeah.
And then halfway through, Papa and Mama came and picked us up. And we went, and my mother's mother came too, because they were dancing every night, in
she was the babysitter.
And we were two of us. And then my grandmother was looking after us.
So
Narva Jöso, they had on a beach.
Yeah.
One was for everybody. One was for women, and the other ones were naked women. And then we are naked men.
Yeah.
So,
Paljas porkandi.
Yes. And some men like to walk along the beach all the time.
Did you have to pay?
Huh?
Did you have to pay on the beach?
No, it's a free beach.
I remember in Europe.
This section is for men and this is a women's, and this is all over.
Well, in Europe, there's some beaches you have to pay to go onto.
Oh,
no, not Eesti, like Venice and that.
Oh, probably, yes.
Yeah. So basically, my map really tells me of stories that are related to my family, where they've lived, where they've visited, the major attractions, and the sort of the touristy areas, So Viljandi is the very rich land and very cultural. It's the bread bowl of Eesti. Pärnu is the very summery. And then you've got the island life and the marine life. And then you've got the cultural centre of Tartu and the university, the railway. And so it's pinpointing all those sort of touristy and sort of family connections.
Yeah. Do you think it changed much when you first did it? I don't think we can find it. Has it got more detailed or?
This one was done not recently.
Yeah.
I think this would be more detailed because we've seen from the archives the original maps from the 1930s, and I was taking photos of everyone's family houses and villages, and they wanted to see because the piirkonnat, the boundaries have changed.
Yeah.
And like when we found my great grandfather's house, it's no longer Paina is not.
Oh yeah.
It's in the southern. It
was the county that had the marijuana flag.
Yeah, well now it's in Kanepi.
Kanepi, yeah.
It's now in Kanepi, but before it used to be in another boundary.
Yeah, I've got the
Põltsamaa or something. So we were in the wrong region, but we were close. We were only 5 k's north, close to Tartu. So because of those name changes, we were in the right area, but we were sort of saying someone sent us to Hunters Hill and we went off to Milson's Point or something, We were close, but we found it.
Yeah.
When we found Toomas Juust. Tom Cheese.
Thomas Cheese.
Thomas Cheese.
At the bus stop.
Yeah, at the bus stop.
After meeting the woman with blood on her hands.
From the strawberry
Yeah.
picking.
Mm.
Yeah, so we've had there's a lot of good memories of traipsing around trying to find family residences, you know, because that was nearly 100 years ago. So it's a lot of things have changed and other things haven't changed. Yeah.
Do you feel like you actually... Well, the title of the show is like tunned maad, and I don't know if you know the Godulmar song. It's a poem, and then it got turned into a song. I guess the kind of central question of the show is like, how do we remember places when we're not there? We're not physically in that location.
Like, what are the things that you remember the most? I can talk about that.
I mean, you've been away from Sydney for a long time. Like,
Yeah.
How do you remember or stay connected to a place when you're not physically there?
I think the biggest things that I remember from a place are like the weather and smells. I have like distinct memories of smells of like Estonia. For example, campfire smoke, because there's always, or like even smoke from like smoke saunas, and then fireplaces in houses, because like most houses have fireplaces. So then that's like a really distinct memory, and a lot of the time if I smell like a campfire or a fireplace, then I think of Estonia straight away. And then other smells, just like, you know, when you're just walking down the street and you smell a random smell and you're like, whoa, that's Estonia. Because like the first time I went there, I would have been younger, like not really young, but like in primary school. So I guess that's when like you're kind of forming your memories and like things, and like the things that you experience when you're younger, like you are pretty distinct. Like they're a big thing in your life because like everything is new. So then those types of memories, then I remember better.
Yeah.
If that makes
Did you kind of go into, when you grew up, did you have any ideas of the places that you're going to be going and have a previous idea of what it was going to be like?
I guess like the language and culture was always around me. Growing up, they were doing folk dancing and like speaking, or at least hearing Estonian and speaking a bit of Estonian, especially with my mum and grandma when I was like much younger. So that was always around me. But then like, I don't know if I really knew what the country was like. I don't think when you're younger, you really think so much about what it's going to be like. I don't know. Yeah, I really can't remember.
Yeah. I mean, when you think back to that time when you were there, like, what do you remember apart from the smells? Like, do you kind of think back to that time or think of going back?
Like, I think the things I experienced the first time in Estonia definitely made me look forward to going back the other times, and were things that I looked forward to. And like things I think that were the most different from Australia were my favorite things. Like the forests were very different, and like picking berries and mushrooms in the forests, and then swinging on the like village swings, the gulagik. And then the weather, it was like a different type of weather, colder and rainier, but then not bad.
How, because you were there for quite a while, like you experienced that full season.
Yeah, when I was older, then I got to like experience the snow, which was really special, and that was very different. Like everything about that was like amazing. Like every day I'd be like, wow, there's snow and all the snowflakes and things. And then was there for summer as well, and like the festivals in summer, and again the bonfires, and then the summer heat, even though for us in Australia it wouldn't be so hot. Like when you're there it feels really hot, but like all those things were like are really special. Yeah, the climate, and then the nature and the cultural aspects.
And I wanted to ask, like, because this idea of like Ma, of like country and kind of being more attuned to it when you come from not an outsider perspective, but like kind of, because maa can mean multiple things in Estonian. Like you can refer to like the countryside or like the earth itself, like the soil. And I guess what does it mean to really be aware of like the maa, or even in like a First Nations context, like probably more aware of it in terms of where you're based? Like what does it mean for you to be in on somebody else's country in Connemara, like, and being as a outsider, and what that process feels like of like orientating yourself or adjusting yourself to that?
I guess like constantly learning and listening to people whose country it is and learning from them, and like learning about respect for the country.
Nah, it's a hard one. It's like, and it's kind of, I've always felt a very weird relationship to Estonia, feeling equally outside of it and being very aware of things in an Australian context. But then you go there and you're like, it's a totally different time period and that like that we're raised in, and feeling such a deep connection to a specific period of time as well. And kind of getting that confrontation that maybe what the country that we know doesn't exist.
I have like so many things in my brain, but I find it hard to like articulate, you know.
I guess is there a pull for you to come back? Well, I guess, yeah, go back, live there.
Maybe at some point. Like I definitely want to go back. I think it would be cool to live there for like a specific amount of time. But I think then also I feel like I probably wouldn't end up there for really the rest of my future or anything. Because yeah, I guess growing away from there, yeah, like you were saying, you're not necessarily really inside.
It's a funny term.
Things to learn again, and like just the way that things that are normal ways of talking in Estonia, like conversations with people, like habits and routines and things, are very different to what you've grown up with. Even though you've grown up around Estonian culture, it doesn't mean like you've grown up in Estonian society.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's, actually, Linus is going to be moving to Eesti.
Really? When?
I think it's in September. He's planning on packing
Everyone's
up.
going.
But he I think it's more permanent for him, like a longer term thing. I really want to ask him what's making him go that far, like, because I don't think he's ever been before.
No, that's really cool.
He was talking about the military service, asking me like how it works, how voluntary it is, and I was like, I don't think it's voluntary if you're a permanent citizen.
Compulsory, unless you have like a good excuse, like you're not actually there.
And it's interesting. I think I remember Marika. I don't know what the context was. It must have been at Survey, but we were talking about conscription, and she was like, I would fight for my country, like, if I got called up, I would go and fight on an instant, like and it was really interesting, that kind of like that call for urgency of like going there, even if you're not living there, to go and do service or something. It's sort of like a I don't know, some kind of connection that calls people there.
I guess we grow up with like, yeah, hearing about stories of our grandparents and like their memories of Estonia, and like, and then our parents maybe growing up in that culture, but in Australia, but still culture is such a big part of their lives. It's like, then in our generation, it's kind of a little bit more removed, but it's still like been a big part of our growing up. The way we know each other is through like Estonian activities.
I was told that these maps were only one of 3 left in the world.
Yes, that was my
I don't know if Maie Barrow said that or someone said that. 1938, and it was an official. It's the last proper survey ever done of Eesti before the Russians came in, and they are phenomenally detailed. They will actually show you.
You
can see the
They will
towns.
actually show you individual houses and farmhouses.
My grandfather's
House.
Talu
is on that.
on a map.
We were looking last night, and
It's my father. My father spent hours looking at this when I was in the wall in East saying, "Oh yeah, my second cousin lives in that house over there."
That's right.
Yeah, it's just incredibly
amazing, and I'm so pleased that you had the sense, the common sense, and decency to retrieve those from the rubbish pile.
Yeah.
I am so angry with a certain person who threw them out. They had no right to do that. The bit of history of these maps is that, and I'm not even sure who was the original owner, but these maps and the aluminium frames were donated to the Eesti Üliõpilaskond Sydney's. It was an academic society that was established here in Sydney in the 1950s. Valdemar Wilder was one of the founding members.
It's the art
of that university society, and it was pretty active in the 1950s and 60s as a student society.
So they were all, had they studied in Eesti or like?
Some of them had studied in Eesti, in Estonia, in Germany, and continued their studies in Sydney, and it was very active. And they actually had that room upstairs at Eesti Maja where the archives were. That room upstairs was the Eesti Üliõpilaskond room for a while.
Right.
Yeah.
The kind of meeting room that they would use with all the shelves or the big.
Sorry. Actually, no, it's not that front room.
Yeah.
Not that front room. The room on the other side of the women's toilets, the back section.
That's like the Maie Kotu. We call that Maie Kotu.
Oh well, then it was called the Eesti Üliõpilaskond tuba, and that's how I first became aware of the existence of this map. It was in the wall of that room, what you call the Maie Kotu tuba.
Yeah.
And then when the Eesti Üliõpilaskond folded in the early 1970s, I was at that stage a member of the Eesti Üliõpilaskond, and what do you do with the map?
Yeah.
Because Dio Grossimbo wanted that room given over to general use. We thought, well, what do we do? And at that stage, my father made the suggestion that why don't you donate it to the RSL, and they can put it up in their room.
Yeah.
Because as you know, the soldiers would love to sort of show where the battles were, and the Russians here and the Germans there and all that. So that got put up in the RSL room. Yeah. And there it stayed for 20 or 30 years until the day that the Dalgud came along and this was chucked into the rubbish bin.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
There was a few. I know there was quite a few trophies as well that got thrown out.
Don't tell me.
I think they were golf trophies or something.
Golf trophies. And I've spoken to Maie Barrow, and yes, we're going to sort of see if we can conserve these.
What are you going to do? The frames and
I think they have to be, if they want to be displayed, they need to be protected because the paper's quite
a little bit of mould on some of them.
Some are a bit worse for where especially the ones at the end.
On the side is all.
Look at that one.
I've tried to keep them as dry as possible.
Yep.
But there's a bit of water damage from. I think that was
being on the wall.
Yeah, I think because that's the Saaremaa one. So that's like I don't know if there's missing panels or they just didn't collect all.
No, there weren't. It didn't form a proper grid.
Yeah, it was.
There was some missing. Yeah,
because you've got
there's the two for
Latvia?
Yeah, those.
yeah.
Oh, 3 of them are missing. Well, not missing. They just never were collected.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
But I mean, all of it is covered in those 12.
That's right.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I mean, I was talking to my mum about like, oh, how cool would it be on the staircase, having them up like, at home. But I think people should be able to appreciate it.
Yeah, look, this is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think how old they are. Like, I remember somebody mentioned about them being smuggled out of ASD or something.
Well, someone must have, and I don't know who that person was who brought them from ASD, but in their suitcase, there you go.
I remember because when I first got them, I contacted the Rafa Museum, or...
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it was a museum in Esti, and they were like, oh, we've digitized these in high res, and so for my exhibition, on the back of the leaflets people can take, I'm going to have a randomized, like, 1 of 12 of these on the back of each A3 paper so people can take a part home with them. Because originally the show was going to display these, and and I was speaking to Maie, and she's like, unprotected, it's not a great idea. Like,
that's true.
Like, it's an open space,
that's true, yeah.
But I still, because the whole show kind of started from these maps being all about.
That's good that this is germinated into something which you're going to turn into a subject.
The timing of the show is really funny because I'm going to Estonia like the day after the show finishes. So it all kind of is all related, and then you fortuitously asking about these maps. It was the timing was it felt right to do it. Yeah.
It was meant to be.
Yeah, it feels that way. It feels like very random. I was looking, so the title of the show is called tunned maad, and I chose that title because I was looking into the history of this particular map, and apparently they got reproduced as hiking maps, and
I believe it.
Yeah, and it was called tunned maad, and they reproduced it for like just general use.
What year was that then?
I think 1940 or something. It was. I don't know how they would have done that during the war period. Yeah, I have like an article on like the history of it.
Brilliant.
And then I started looking into the Goduma song.
Yeah.
So it's all. I'm really fascinated with the history of this because I'm sure it was probably more of a surveillance, like war time, like knowing where each town and village is.
That's true.
But it's.
We actually yesterday look was over.
Well, it was funny. We were trying to find like a town called Korijärve in Valga, and I had to use Google Maps on my phone to like. I had to find it's around here. It looks like a much bigger lake on Google Maps, but so I was like, okay. On Google Maps, I was like, okay, where's Ansla to Korijärve? And then it would show me, and then I'm like, okay, where's that to there? And we had to like do some trigonometry to find it out.
I'm sure that some of the things have changed in 80 years.
It has even the names.
Roads, lakes.
Yes.
Yeah. Towns.
Yeah, true. Yeah, no, it's really cool. I'm glad.
Well, I'm going to get these to the archives as soon as I can, and we'll try and give them a good home and a good future. That's good. Yeah, I love maps. Ever since I was in the Boy Scouts, I used to love the Army Ordnance maps that you used to be able to get from the Boy Scout store.
Yeah.
And go bushwalking and orienteering. Yeah. With all the contours and a bit like this. Yeah. Very accurate.
Is that the only exhibition for you, or is there other exhibitions with you?
There's a corridor space, and then there's a separate room, and there's another exhibition that I'm pretty sure is all about like archaeology and kind of it's somebody's master's project. So we're gonna be showing at the same time.
All right.
But I'll have the one wall, and so
what you have to talk to do? How will you be? Oh, you won't be there.
No, I won't be in Esti yet. I'll be in. It depends if I'm working. Because if I'm.
Have you got the speech ready or whatever?
I don't know if I want to make a speech. Part of it is that I wanted the recording to be like...
Yes, but
that
the
people could
recording,
listen in.
you can always say why you are doing it.
Depends what the other person does, because
All right.
like on the night, if they want to do a speech, because part of me, the whole rationale for their... See, I'm not even sure whether to call it an exhibition or whether it's more of a collection or a presentation. I've gone in and I've done the colours, I've scanned it, I've changed. Some of them I've had to change, actually, like I've done the editing because they drew it vertical and I had to flip it.
Right.
So they're not originals, they're not the originals, but part of me also wants to let people see the originals. So when they're presented in the show, they're going to be one on top of each other, and I could either do just two and swap it. In the second week I come in and change the, like if you get two of those, what happens is that one becomes hidden behind the other and then you don't actually get to see the full work. And so, but then I had also the idea, if it was 105 maps, that's 105 years since independence, and then I could do 3 of them, so one, 2, 3, and that could be 35 maps with 3 ones each. But that means that if I change it twice, that still means that not everyone will get to go to the front.
Now people would know where Estonia is, or is
well, that's kind of the whole point of the show. The title is Tunned maad.
Yeah.
People don't
know.
Or even Estonians don't know. So it's like...
Of course they don't know. Because those who came over when they were young and they were in school in here, they wouldn't know much unless you really, like you've been really interested in everything. Not all of them are. Can you see now, Thomas Bill's got 2 boys. Yes, he's dead. But I mean, Thomas Bill has got grown up. I don't think she know anything about Estonia.
Well, that was the whole point. It's that why do people associate themselves with a location or a place when they don't even know what it looks like? You've seen some of the maps that they don't resemble anything. But some people who've been living outside of Eesti for so long, for their whole life basically, as children, but they can remember each town that they grew up in.
That's like, what's the name? Weatherman in Kadak. He knows all about it. He can do the map like that. He was at this one who...
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. It's that there's these different relationships that people have
exactly.
to a location, and whether, if it is important that people know what a place looks like when they don't live there. Like, is that the point of being Estonian or being any nationality?
Yeah. Well, I've been with, I can't remember which doctor it was. Was it Ambarst or something? And he said, where you come from, just a long time ago. And I said, I'm born in Estonia and, I'm in here now. I said, oh yes, Estonia got those beautiful women, so beautiful. And I said, yes, it's a very interesting old town. He said, I always wanted to go there. If I ever wanted to go anywhere, I would go to, And when I was doing this therapy,
No, aquatherapy.
Yes, and one of the men who was doing the physio for me,
nurses?
He took me around. But I had to walk, so I had a stick and he had to be with me because if I fall or something, and we came all around in here, and he said, well, tell me about Estonia. He asked me where I came from. I said, well, Estonia.
You still get asked where you came from.
Small town, and he said, it sounds very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so some people know more than others.
They are interested because really you don't probably, when something happens, then people are, oh, where is Estonia? No, otherwise.
I remember when Russia invaded Ukraine.
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, like, is your family okay? I'm like, what do you mean my family? Like, they don't live in Ukraine. Like, because they just assume that they're all one country, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all
exactly.
And it was frustrating at some point because they don't educate themselves to.
But some are not interested, couldn't care less. But some are interested, you know, they listen to news. Some people even don't read the paper or listen to the news, you don't, they have nothing. But it's the same, I remember when Kong called out me testing my memory, and she asked me what day it is and where you live, you know, and then he said, what is the president in Australia? Prime Minister, yes. Oh, I can't remember when it was.
Yeah.
That's a long time ago. And
It's hard to tell when they're always changing.
Yes, exactly. And that's how you get, you know, if you remember. But if you're not interested in politics or you don't listen, well, how would you know?
Well, this was the whole exercise was about remembering.
Yeah.
I didn't, when I asked people to draw it, because I was doing it before Eesti Päevad.
Yeah, I remember when we had some tools there.
Eesti Maja.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Ragnar wouldn't do it. Siina wouldn't do it. He said, I'm too old. And somebody else said...
I don't remember Siina saying
that. Siina was on the table, or on the table on the side. And Tina said, no, I can't remember anything. And since
some people did get defensive.
Yes, and somebody said, oh God, do I have to do? What do I do? I don't know.
Yeah, it was quite hard because I wanted 100 specifically for 2018.
Yeah.
For the independence, and that was hard. So there's a few in there from Adelaide, that I asked Lucy the Semenovs.
Yeah.
They helped arrange. I think they got about 10 people to do it.
Yeah, that's it.
Which is
out of a lot. Yeah.
You know, it doesn't sound like a lot of people, but sitting down with them and
thinking
and encouraging them, not putting people on the spot. It's and people stress out, and then I remember when people would do it with others next to them, they would be looking at each other and cross-referencing.
Yeah.
And then somebody would be like, oh, I remember that time. And like they would be checking.
Well, I know it down because we've been living in so many places, you know, all over. I wouldn't know all the boundaries.
Well, you've got this map here.
Yeah. And what's in the back?
I don't know. You've written, I think that's the size of it. Because wasn't this in a frame before?
Yeah.
But you've stuck something onto it.
You're going to put it up, are you?
No, it's too big. I think they have a copy of this at Eesti Maja.
Oh, I think so.
What's the photo in the bottom left? What does it? It's too dark. Well, it looks like a saw or rubber.
Because that was torn, got wet and got torn.
Yeah. So
and I thought I put some Estonia.
You covered it up.
Covered it up. It wasn't affecting any of those things.
It's a big map.
Yeah, it is. I think we got it in Canada.
It says Stockholm up here.
Oh, in Sweden we got it.
Sweden, probably.
Yeah. Well, Albi was in Sweden.
When was it made? 1974.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And look, how that's the dark inside in here. And
because of the forests?
More probably like trees and
parks. Yeah. And these look like a desert almost. Yeah. But they're more like, farms and
exactly.
agricultural lands.
Yeah. And look how many rivers there are. A lot of rivers.
See, that's Vörtsjärv.
No.
And then Emmajoki is here.
Emmajoki, yeah.
I don't know what that one, that's to Babnor.
Yeah, I can't remember. But that's a Peipsjärv over there.
Peipsi, yeah. And then there's...
That's half.
Pikvajärv.
Yeah.
This does have Betsari, see? That's interesting because this is 74. Was Betsari Petseri was taken by the Russians, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Well, it is nowadays. It's called. It's got a Russian name now.
All right.
And the border actually.
And Narva is there.
Narva.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know the doctor. Yeah.
But even this map.
Yeah.
See this orange line?
Yeah.
The border actually goes up to the river. So this is a different border.
Yeah. And that is Narva-Jõesuu where we used to go. Narva-Jõesuu.
Oh, that's right on the border.
Yeah.
What was in there?
That was where we went to police all those houses for policemen.
For holiday?
For public, for who were in police and like.
To go on holiday?
Yes.
Yeah.
Every half in what's the name, Talu and half.
I'm surprised you wouldn't have gone to Pärnu or something.
Pärnu, we were living, but I can't remember Pärnu. I've been Pärnu now, but I can't remember. I got pictures when I was small. And one Mama used to say to me, "Oh, I had such a hard time in Pärnu when we went to the beach. Maret was going like this, you know, and I was mile ahead. Yeah. I was running and Maret was hanging on and she was in the window, hurry up, Maret, and to stop, come back, running." Actually, I don't know why she was worried because there's not many cars.
No, that's funny.
Yeah, I got pictures taken with me and my grandmother, mother's mother, and Maret. But we lived there.
Yeah, you lived in.
Because one Mama said, when we came back from Pärnu to, I don't know if went to Tapa or went to, I think we went to Tapa, and everybody asked where do you live? Possi 82, Possi 80 Street. You still remember it? Possi 80.
Possi 80.
Yes, that was the street name. Yeah, and one Mama said, I always said, somehow it just clicked in my mind.
That's in Pärnu.
That was in Pärnu, and we weren't living in Pärnu anymore.
Still remembered it.
Yes.
Well, we went to Tapa, we went to Tartu. We were like following your footsteps. We went,
all right.
And then we went to the Kanepi, where the your
Kambja, seal see talu is.
Yeah, but it's in Kanepi now.
Okay.
It's called Kanepi with the cannabis leaf on it. And we went there, and that was around somewhere there. And then we went to Kuressaare. We didn't spend much time in Pärnu. I can't remember because I was too small. Oh.
Yes, but we went long in Kuressaare too, because I remember going in. I wasn't in school, and we had. It was iced up. It was all iced up, and we got here, and then we had to got some horses.
A sleigh.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we all wrapped up, and when we got there, and then we had a house, a very nice house.
Yeah.
And pretty close to the where the schloss is. Yes.
Yeah.
Because every time my father in the weekend we were going to walking, and she was so particular. You have to be properly dressed, all hats on, and we had those coats, light ones.
Yeah.
The other ones were winter ones, but it was like spring.
Yeah.
And then we had hats on and also just going walking some like a showpieces. I was supposed to go to school. I must have been 7.
Ah, so it would have been 1939.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because they were doing some behind us, they were practicing soldiers had with a gas mask. And they were running around, and I used to peep them, and I was scared.
In Kuressaare?
Yeah, in Kuressaare.
Well, in 39, that's when the war
Yes, and they
Study,
were
yeah.
practicing like, we had the gas max on, and then I had friends there, one of the boys, little boys, we were playing, and we had these little stones, and then when we have to leave in summer holiday, we never went back.
Well,
So
it
it probably
it was well after the Soviets, it was militarized, and
no.
well, it became like a fortress after.
Yes, but we never went back there, and I want to get my stones.
Your stones. It was interesting. One of my friends is going to move there, and he looks like he's gonna do the conscription.
Yeah.
Gets his citizenship.
Oh.
And he thought it was voluntary, and I said no, it's not voluntary. You have to do
He's
it.
Estonian.
Yeah, Aisatolin.
Aisatoli, right.
But we know another friend of ours went and did it. He did paramedic. The thing is that once you're in it, you get called up every 5 years.
Yes, exactly. And then when the war starts or something, you'll be there. Up. Why would you want to do that? I would even
fight for your country.
Why would you want? But I wouldn't take your Estonian passport either. I wouldn't take it.
I know somebody I know is leaving tomorrow to Eesti.
Yeah.
And they're not no, they're taking their Estonian.
You have to have double passport because with Estonian passport you can't come back to Australia.
They're taking their Eesti passport with them, but they're not showing it.
Yeah.
They're just hiding it.
Yes, that's right. I wouldn't take it at all. And because you have to have Australian passport to get back in here. You can go with Estonian passport to Estonia, but once you come back here, you got to have an Australian passport. That is a law.
Yeah, I don't need to. If I move there, I will.
Because they even don't put stamps on it anymore.
Yeah, it's just digital.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I find it's quite interesting how...
Who was called... Who was called in... Was it...
there was Evan, but he was the one that did the paramedic.
All right.
But he volunteered.
Didn't Ella do something?
She did some training, but it wasn't conscription. It wasn't like... It was she got to fire a gun and...
I could fire the gun now.
I know the photo.
A club.
I know, in England in 1949.
But we have to travel there, and he knew my father. He said, and he said, I wrote a letter. Oh, your daughter is pretty good. That is my gun went down, and it was so heavy.
No, it's a good photo. I like the
that's my grandmother.
It's a good photo.
Chasing Russians.
The Russian. That's right. It is facing east, so it's in the right direction.
Yeah, but it's chasing them.
All the way from London.
No, boy. I did a lot of things.
And then you played tennis in Australia.
Yes, and I wanted to come because you can play at night.
And did you?
Never.
Never.
Not once. But I played tennis in England.
Yes, we've got a tennis court outside. You can
and
play.
I played this ping pong. We had a ping pong table in hospital. And I played on a ship. Mm-hmm. And I got a little bell. Yes.
As a prize?
Yes, because I won.
That's right. I remember you used to play. We used to play in the garage.
No.
Playing ping pong.
Yes, I made a ping pong table. We had a big ping pong table.
Is that the one in my mum's garage?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.